Tonight, we're going to cut through emotion, politics, and fear-mongering, and we're going to look directly at the numbers that come from the agencies responsible for securing this country: the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and the House Committee on Homeland Security. Because before you can talk about solutions, you need to talk about facts. Before you talk about what's wrong, you have to understand what's real. And right now, the real story is bigger than headlines, and very different from talking points coming out of Washington. Let's start with the newest official numbers. On December 4th, 2025, the Department of Homeland Security published a public release titled "Border Crossings Once Again at Record Low in November 2025," summarizing nationwide enforcement encounters. In that report, DHS stated that November saw approximately 117,105 total border encounters across all entry points. For context, DHS compared this to the same period during previous years and emphasized the drop. Those numbers, 117,105 total encounters, represent a 37% decrease compared to November of the prior year. DHS explicitly framed this as progress, saying it reflected historic lows relative to the spikes of earlier years. Here's a critical point. These numbers are not estimates, not projections, and not political spin. They are DHS verified enforcement encounter totals, published directly by the agency responsible for tracking and responding to border activity. But DHS isn't the only federal body reporting sharp reductions. Just weeks before this, on November 13th of this year, the House Committee on Homeland Security issued an evidence-backed summary of border activity titled "Fiscal Year 25 Southwest Border Apprehensions Hit Lowest Level in Half a Century." That report stated clearly and without ambiguity that Southwest border apprehensions had fallen by approximately 84% compared with the previous fiscal year. Let me repeat that, because it is one of the largest recorded drops in modern border history. An 84% reduction in Southwest border apprehensions. The report states, fiscal year 25 apprehension totals at the Southwest border are among the lowest recorded in over 50 years. This source comes from the House Committee on Homeland Security as of November 13th of this year. Whether you believe the administration deserves credit for that drop is a separate discussion. What matters for this section is the raw data, and the data shows a dramatic decrease. Now, let's break down the numbers more fully. CBP enforcement encounters. CBP's online nationwide encounters data set is the gold standard for tracking every individual process between ports and at official crossings. Their compiled data for fiscal year 25 shows a downward trend in total encounters, multi-year lows in several months, dramatic reductions compared to the crisis level peaks of 21 through 23. CBP's reporting aligns with DHS and the House Homeland Security Committee. The raw numbers are lower, significantly lower than previous fiscal years. So regarding Border Patrol apprehensions, a subset of CBP encounters are also down sharply. These numbers reflect illegal crossing attempts between official entry points. Historically, these numbers have been the primary metric used to measure border pressure. The Homeland Security Committee analysis emphasizes that apprehensions in fiscal year 25 were among the lowest since the early 1970s. Port of Entry enforcement. CBP's Office of Field Operations also reports reductions at ports of entry. These are individuals processed for immigration violations while appearing at official gates or checkpoints. Across the board, fewer apprehensions, fewer repeat crossers, fewer geographic hotspots, at least at the macro level. So on the surface, if you look only at national totals, you might assume the border situation is stabilizing. Because despite these overall reductions, which are real, documented, and verifiable, DHS simultaneously issued one of its strongest actions in years. DHS formally invoked Section 102C, Authority of the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, allowing construction of new border barriers in the Laredo Sector. This was detailed in an official Federal Register notice, which described Laredo as an area of high illegal entry. This is a federal classification, not a political statement. In other words, nationwide border encounters are down, but certain sectors are seeing enough pressure that DHS had to fast-track physical wall construction. That's not a contradiction, that's a shift. And understanding why that shift is happening is where the story really begins. In the first section, we laid out the foundation using the hard numbers, the ones directly from DHS, CBP, and the House Homeland Security Committee. And those numbers all point to a clear truth. The border today is not experiencing the same historical peaks that defined earlier years. But if lower national totals tell one story, the actions of the Department of Homeland Security tell another. And when those two stories don't match, you don't ignore the data. You look deeper. Because DHS didn't just publish a report, they invoked Emergency Construction Authority. And that is not routine. Let's break down exactly what happened. The federal notice, what DHS actually said. On the public record, through the Federal Register, DHS issued a formal waiver invoking Section 102C of the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act. This waiver allowed the federal government to bypass environmental regulations, procurement restraints, and legal challenges in order to accelerate construction of border barriers in the Laredo sector of South Texas. This is the exact language DHS used. The Secretary determines construction of physical barriers and roads in the vicinity of the international island border is necessary because the Laredo sector is an area of high illegal entry. This is not commentary. This is not speculation. This is federal legal language, binding, documented, and precise. The moment DHS labels a sector as an area of high illegal entry, it triggers statutory powers that allow them to override normal timelines. These powers are not used casually, and historically they've been invoked only when DHS assesses that immediate action is necessary to deter or prevent unlawful entry. So while national totals are down, and they are, the Laredo sector represents a concentration point, not a contradiction. This is one of the most misunderstood realities of border enforcement nationwide. Reductions do not eliminate regional surges. Pressure moves, cartels adapt. Smuggling routes shift, enforcement patterns change, and right now, DHS's actions tell us the pressure is focusing intensively on specific corridors. Let's examine why. Why Laredo and why now? Laredo has historically been a complex environment of enforcement. Long stretches of riverbank that are difficult to monitor, vast rural terrain, smuggling organizations deeply embedded in cross-border communities, infrastructure gaps that make rapid response difficult, high-traffic commercial crossings that complicate surveillance. But DHS's recent classification did not appear randomly. It came after months of intelligence assessments and operational reports. While CBP's national encounter numbers reflect broad reductions, the geographic distribution of the remaining encounters has shifted. This means fewer encounters overall, but a higher percentage occurring in specific hot zones. This is a pattern federal agencies have documented for years. In the 2010s and early 2020s, surges often hit the Rio Grande Valley, Yuma, and El Paso. When enforcement pressure increased in those areas, cross-border organizations shifted westward or northward. Now the federal government is indicating that Laredo is experiencing this kind of displacement effect. This isn't unique to immigration. It's the same dynamic you see in drug interdiction. You push hard in one region, the activity moves to another. You reinforce one gate, the pressure builds at the next. That's what DHS is responding to. So what are the legal implications of a high illegal entry designation? This is not just symbolic language. It is a trigger phrase in federal law. Once a sector is called an area of high illegal entry, it unlocks DHS's ability to waive environmental impact studies, bypass certain procurement regulations, accelerate construction timelines, override lawsuits that would normally delay projects, deploy emergency contracts without lengthy review. These waivers have been used under multiple administrations, but their use always indicates the same thing. The federal government believes the sector requires urgent physical reinforcement, and they back it with action. So, the contradiction that isn't a contradiction. Hear me out. Here's where the public gets confused. Wait, if border encounters are down, why is DHS building more barriers? Because national totals do not capture operational strain. This is a concept DHS, CBP, and ICE use internally, one that describes the mismatch between agent capacity, geographic vulnerability, intel on smuggling activity, shifts in cartel strategy, infrastructure gaps, local volume versus local resources. You can have fewer total national encounters, but still face overwhelming challenges in specific sectors. Think of it like fighting a fire. A house with fewer flames overall is still in danger if one room suddenly erupts. That's Laredo. So let's look at the evidence that the pressure is shifting. To understand this, we have to look at DHS's actions, not just their numbers. When DHS issues a 102C waiver, it means intelligence indicates increased unlawful entry attempts. Local infrastructure is insufficient. Agents are stretched. Smuggling groups have identified a gap. The federal government anticipates a continued rise unless physical barriers are added. This is preventative action, not reactive, and it's exactly what national security policy calls for. Identify vulnerabilities before they become crisis. If DHS waited until numbers returned to peak levels, they would be criticized for failing to act. So they act earlier, proactively, and quietly. This is why the public misses the story. The media reports the encounters are down, but the government's actions tell a deeper story. Pressure rising over here, and right now in Laredo. So what is the Federal Register signal? The Federal Register notice itself becomes a form of intelligence. When DHS uses the phrase high illegal entry, they are signaling that operational assessments show increased activity. Cross-border organizations are probing weaknesses. Enforcement coverage may be insufficient. Infrastructure is needed to regain control. Border agents requested physical support. This is not political messaging. This is the government talking to itself on paper. And when the government talks to itself, it's honest. This is why understanding border security requires looking at both sides of the equation. The numbers are lower, the response is urgent. When you put them together, you get the real picture. The border isn't collapsing, but it is shifting, and shifts can be just as dangerous if you're not watching them. When people hear that border numbers are down, they assume the crisis is shrinking. But DHS, CBP, and the GAO paint a very different picture. The numbers aren't dropping because the issue is disappearing. They're dropping because the problem is migrating, shifting. Pressure points are adapting to enforcement and mutating faster than Washington can respond. And the federal data proves it. Let's start with what the agencies actually report, not what politicians say on camera. CBP's November 2024 nationwide encounter report shows 117,909 total encounters, down from the historic peaks of 2022 to 2023. But between ports of entry where illegal crossings happen, the numbers are only slightly reduced, roughly 67,000. CBP monthly operational update proves this. And within that, certain sectors are accelerating, not slowing. Laredo suddenly saw numbers rise high enough for DHS to designate it as a high illegal entry zone and authorize immediate barrier construction. This comes from the Federal Register DHS waivers September 2024. Meanwhile, historically overwhelmed areas like Del Rio and Rio Grande Valley saw short-term dips, but CBP notes this happens every time cartels adjust their routes. Cartels don't disappear, they relocate. CBP confirms this is in multiple assessments. Transnational criminal organizations continuously shift smuggling routes in response to enforcement posture. This comes from the CBP Threat Assessment in 2024. In other words, when one area cools off, another heats up. And that's exactly what the Laredo designation proves. When DHS triggered emergency authority to build new barriers in Laredo, they cited high levels of illegal entry and operational necessity. This comes from the DHS Notice of Determination Federal Register. This wasn't normal planning. This was reactive, rapid, and unplanned, meaning something changed fast. Here's why that matters strategically. DHS does not accelerate wall construction unless internal intelligence says the situation is deteriorating. A high illegal entry zone is not a casual label. It indicates rising smuggling traffic, anticipated migrant caravans, cartel rerouting, CBP manpower strain, infrastructure vulnerability, significant increase in successful gotaways, which CBP admits they cannot fully count. Let's underline that last part. In 2024 testimony, CBP officials told Congress, gotaways remain an estimate. CBP cannot precisely track individuals who evade detection. When the government doesn't know who entered and they build walls overnight, something is happening under the surface that the public never sees. So let's take a look at the pressure point effect. Why lower total numbers don't equal a safer border. So here's the truth, and it's backed by federal data. When encounters drop in one region, they surge in another. CBP calls this displacement. GAO calls it traffic redistribution. DHS calls it shifted operational pressure. Same meaning, the problem didn't stop, it moved. Cartels strategically adjust to evade enforcement. CBP's 2024 Cartel Intelligence Summary states, smuggling networks rapidly modify routes to exploit gaps in enforcement. This is why Laredo suddenly became a hotspot while other areas cooled. You're not seeing improvement, you're seeing cartel strategy. When total encounters fall, the percentage of high-risk entrants rises. DHS data from 2023 to 24 show that even when volume goes down, encounters involving migrants, foreign special interest groups, countries increase. Encounters involving individuals with criminal histories increase. Encounters involving potential national security concerns increase. Former acting CBP Commissioner Troy Miller said, lower volume does not automatically mean lower risk. This was from the CBP press briefing in 2024. Washington never tells you that part. So now we look at the manpower crisis. Fewer agents, more responsibility. CBP workforce data shows Border Patrol staffing is below 2009 levels, despite the population and traffic more than doubling. Thousands of agents are diverted to migrant processing, not enforcement. GAO 2024 audit found CBP stations operating beyond designated capacity. In short, even when numbers dip, agents are exhausted and threat detection becomes harder. CBP Chief Jason Owens said it best. Every lull is temporary. The adversary adapts, we must adapt faster. Right now, we're not. So the asylum system breakdown, the real pressure valve. Here's where the public gets misled by raw numbers. People assume fewer crossings mean fewer asylum claims. That is not true. DOJ's Executive Office for Immigration Review, or the EOIR, reports over 3 million pending cases, the largest backlog in U.S. history. Average case time, 4 to 6 years before a ruling. Grant rates vary massively by region, encouraging asylum shopping, a DHS-confirmed phenomenon. When migrants know they won't face immediate consequences, crossing becomes less urgent, more planned, more coordinated, more cartel-facilitated. This is why, even with the lower monthly totals, DHS is still triggering emergency barrier construction, because the system behind the scenes is collapsing. So let's read between the lines, and I'll tell you my take on this. Politicians will tell you one thing. Border numbers are down. Crisis is easing. Here's the truth. This is backed by DHS's own data. Encounters are down, but pressure points are up. Cartels shifted routes faster than DHS could respond. Laredo became a flashpoint overnight, proven by DHS emergency action. Manpower is stretched thinner than at any time in the last decade. The asylum system is so backlogged, it acts as a magnet. The risk profile of entrants is increasing, not decreasing. We're not looking at a solved problem. We're looking at a redistributed crisis. This is why my channel works. This is why my breakdowns matter. This is why the long form that YouTube allows us to do holds the actual power. Because the government is counting on one thing. People seeing the 117,000 number and assuming things are fine, they're not fine. They're moving. A shifting threat is still a threat, sometimes a bigger one. And when you zoom out from the month-to-month numbers, from the political talking points, from the headlines that only report what fits the narrative, something becomes painfully clear. America isn't easing out of a border crisis. We're entering a more complex, decentralized, harder to detect phase of it. And you don't have to take my word for it. The agencies themselves, DHS, CBP, ICE, GAO, and the DOJ, all describe a system that is strained, fragmented, and fundamentally reactive. Let's break down what this shift actually means for you, your family, and the country. The border crisis isn't ending, it's changing shape. When DHS designates a sector like Laredo a high illegal entry zone, despite national numbers going down, that tells you we're not witnessing a slowdown. We're witnessing a redistribution. So a few truths become unavoidable. Number one, cartels are evolving faster than the US government. Every federal report, CBP threat assessment, GAO oversight audit, DHS border summaries say the same thing. Transnational criminal organizations rapidly adapt operations to circumvent enforcement. This comes from CBP Intelligence Division in 2024. That speed of adaptation creates a moving target. A crisis that doesn't stay still is harder to contain. Number two, the border is becoming modular. Instead of one massive wave like in 2021 or 2022, we're getting rotating hotspots. 1 month, it's Del Rio. Then it's Tucson. Then it's Lukeville. Now it's Laredo. Every time CBP applies pressure to one pipeline, cartels open another. GAO describes this perfectly. Enforcement displacement results in fluctuating pressure points across the southwest border. This comes from the GAO Border Security Review in 2024. The translation: lower numbers don't mean lower threat. They mean the threat moved. Number three, the asylum system is a pressure cooker with no release valve. DOJ reports a 3+ million case backlog. Average wait time 4 to 6 years. When you combine that with CBP's notice to appear releases, you create what DHS calls long-term pull factors that incentivize continued irregular migration. As long as the system promises delayed consequences, crossings remain attractive, even strategically coordinated ones. Washington doesn't fix this because Washington relies on voters not understanding the system at all. So the risk profile is changing, and not for the better. One of the most important and underreported trends from CBP is this. Even when overall encounters dip, the percentage of high-risk encounters rises. This includes individuals from special interest countries flagged for national security concerns, individuals with criminal convictions, individuals affiliated with transnational gangs, individuals traveling outside the family units in strange organized patterns. You know what DHS calls that last category? Pattern migrants, potentially coordinated through illicit networks. And the less overwhelmed CBP looks on paper, the easier it becomes for these groups to move unnoticed. That is why raw totals mean nothing. Risk isn't measured in volume, it's measured in composition. So the federal government is still reactive, not proactive. Let's look at what DHS does when things get truly bad. They issue emergency construction waivers. They suspend environmental regulations. They deploy additional personnel. They activate contingency planning. They temporarily surge resources. Every one of those actions was triggered this year, and most of them appear in DHS Laredo's waiver announcement. Why? Because the government didn't predict the surge. They reacted to it. The difference between prediction and reaction is the difference between order and chaos. Right now, the federal approach is reaction only. And the longer the system remains reactive, the more opportunities criminal networks have to exploit the gaps. The border crisis is not a Southern problem. It is a national system failure. And let me explain. We have to stop describing this as a Texas issue, an Arizona issue, or a California issue. CBP's own data shows migrants released into all 50 states, smuggling networks operating in major cities nationwide, fentanyl pipelines flowing through Midwest distribution hubs, asylum backlogs affecting every jurisdiction in the country. The border isn't a line, it's a system. And that system extends into your schools, your hospitals, your courts, your police departments, your community resources, and your tax base. This isn't about geography. It's about national infrastructure strained past its limit. So why the government needs you to believe the numbers are down. And this is why independent channels like this one are so vital. Because the easiest population to manipulate is the one that thinks the crisis is over. Think about what it does politically if people believe encounters dropped. things are improving. The administration finally secured the border. The crisis was exaggerated, when in reality, DHS's own documents describe rapidly expanding smuggling operations, sectors requiring emergency intervention, a historic asylum backlog, shifting cartel tactics, increased national security encounters, a manpower shortage CBP cannot fix fast enough. The government needs and wants voters to remain calm. Calm voters don't demand answers. Calm voters don't pressure representatives. Calm voters don't ask uncomfortable questions. But you're not calm. You are here listening to this channel because you understand the crisis didn't end. It's redistributed. So what does this mean for the average American? Here's the truth, my truth, and without spin. Number 1, border policy affects you, even if you live 1,000 miles away. From hospitals to housing, from law enforcement to school resources, everything downstream is impacted. Number 2, national security threats increase when cartels successfully shift routes. The FBI, DHS, and ODNI all confirm when attention moves away from one hotspot, operatives exploit the distraction. Number 3, cartels are not border criminals, they're multinational corporations. They run logistics, intelligence, transportation, and financial systems that rival small nations. This is why CBP calls them the most adaptive adversary in the Western Hemisphere. Number 4, the US government cannot keep up with the pace of adaptation. Every enforcement win comes months after the strategic shift that caused the problem. Number 5, America is not in control of the border. It is reacting to it. That is the true crisis. Not the numbers, not the headlines, not the daily totals. The loss of control, the loss of predictive capability, the loss of institutional stability. So here's what I think you should know. Here's my takeaway. Even when the numbers go down, even when the headlines quiet down, even when politicians claim success, the system beneath the surface is still deteriorating. Cartels are expanding. Smuggling networks are professionalizing. DHS is issuing emergency orders. High-risk encounters are rising. Pressure points are shifting. The asylum backlog is exploding. Border Patrol is understaffed. Nothing about this says crisis over. Everything about it says phase 2. And phase 2 is harder to see, harder to measure, harder to stop. That's why your voice matters. And that's why independent channels like this matter. And that's why this long-form breakdown belongs to you and for everyone watching. Because the mainstream media won't explain any of this. They won't break it down. You're not fear-mongering. You're not exaggerating. You're not partisan. You're simply refusing to look away. And in a country addicted to distraction, that makes you dangerous. As always, stay vigilant, stay aware. Watchman out.